My fiancée slept with my best friend while I planned our wedding alone, so I canceled everything quietly and disappeared from their lives forever afterward. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and for the first time in my life, I genuinely believed everything was finally falling into place. After years of feeling like life was just a series of tests I could barely pass, meeting Emma felt like finding the calm in the middle of a storm. She wasn't dramatic, she wasn't manipulative, and she didn't make mountains out of molehills like so many people in my past. She just was. And for once, I allowed myself to imagine a life where someone actually had my back, where laughter and shared dreams weren't punctuated by betrayal or disappointment. Emma and I had been together for 2 years, and we moved at our own pace. We talked endlessly about our future, small apartment renovations, quiet Saturday mornings sipping coffee together, and eventually, a wedding that wasn't about grandeur but about meaning. I took it all very seriously. I wanted our day to reflect our story, the nights we stayed up talking, the tiny victories we celebrated quietly, the way our laughter filled the apartment after a long week. But I didn't just want it meaningful, I wanted it perfect. So I handled the planning mostly on my own. Extra shifts at work became normal, evenings spent researching venues, tasting menus, and floral arrangements were routine. I juggled budgets meticulously, ensuring every detail was accounted for, from table settings to the playlist, convincing myself this was what love looked like: silent effort, sacrifice, care. I'd scroll through my phone late at night, cross off lists, and feel a warm glow thinking Emma would walk down the aisle without a single worry, trusting me to handle it all. Mark, my best friend since childhood, was always around. Someone I trusted with my life, someone I laughed with until our ribs hurt and cried with when everything else felt unbearable. A brother-like presence, a constant in my otherwise unpredictable world. And yet, as I went to bed one night, exhausted from another 14-hour shift, a faint, nagging unease lingered at the edge of my mind. It was small at first, dismissed as paranoia, but deep down, I sensed a storm brewing, one that would involve the 2 people I trusted most, and it was going to shatter everything I had built. The apartment was quiet, the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant city sirens my only company, and I thought I was finally safe. I had no idea how wrong I was. I thought I had everything under control, that life had finally slowed down enough for me to breathe. Every weekend, I'd meet Emma at our favorite little cafe, sip overpriced lattes, and talk about the wedding again, as if rehearsing our shared dream could make it feel more real. "I can't wait to see you in that dress," I'd say, grinning like an idiot, and she'd laugh, reaching over to squeeze my hand. The warmth in her eyes felt like proof that all my sacrifices, double shifts, skipped dinners, late nights spent on spreadsheets, were worth it. I started noticing small details, tiny things that didn't seem alarming at the time, a shared glance between her and Mark, jokes that felt private, like they existed in a secret language I wasn't part of. I brushed it off, rationalized it. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe working 60 hours a week was making me paranoid. But there was a subtle shift in the air, a tension I couldn't name, a lingering feeling in my chest whenever they were in the same room. Emma would laugh a little too long at Mark's jokes, and he'd mirror it, leaning in like no one else existed. I'd tell myself, stop overthinking it. You're imagining things. Still, the seed of doubt had planted itself firmly. Even at work, my mind wandered. I'd picture them together, sitting somewhere I wasn't, sharing something intimate, laughing at my expense without me knowing. My stomach twisted at the thought, but I pushed it down, convincing myself I was just stressed. Late nights, the smell of my coffee brewing in the kitchenette, city lights stretching through the apartment windows, it was supposed to feel comforting. Instead, it started feeling like a trap. Friends would comment on how happy Emma and I seemed, how solid we were as a couple. I smiled and nodded, but inside, the whispers of suspicion were growing louder. Something was off, and no amount of planning, budgeting, or scheduling could fix that gnawing unease. By the time I collapsed into bed, exhausted and proud of all I'd accomplished for the wedding, the quiet hum of the city outside felt almost sinister. And I didn't know it yet, but the very people I trusted to celebrate our happiness were quietly weaving a secret that would destroy it all. I started noticing things I didn't want to see, but I shoved them into the back of my mind like bad dreams that would fade in daylight. Emma had become distant in subtle ways, checking her phone constantly, working late more often, brushing off weekends we had planned together. Mark's visits became more frequent, and their private jokes, the ones I couldn't decipher, seemed to carry weight I couldn't reach. My stomach twisted when I caught them exchanging glances across a crowded room, smiles too knowing, too comfortable. I kept telling myself, it's nothing. I'm being paranoid. This is just the stress of planning a wedding. But a gnawing unease was growing in my chest, sharp and persistent. One night, I sat on the couch, late hours after work, and replayed the day in my head. I remembered Emma laughing at Mark's stupid joke, leaning a little closer than normal, the way her hand had lingered on his shoulder. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she's just relaxed around him. They've known each other forever. But the knot in my gut refused to untangle. The smell of leftover dinner still lingered in the kitchen, the hum of the fridge, the city lights glowing through the blinds. Everything should have felt normal, safe, warm, but it didn't. I confided in my younger sister, hoping for perspective, hoping someone outside the whirlwind would reassure me. "You're overthinking it," she said, dismissing my fears with a casual shrug. "You just want everything perfect. Maybe you're seeing things that aren't there." Her words should have comforted me, but instead they made me feel foolish, trapped in my own doubt. I wanted to trust her, trust myself, trust Emma, but the seed of suspicion had taken root, and every interaction now felt like a potential lie. Even the simplest things started to hurt: Mark showing up unannounced, Emma texting when I was at work, the small silences that felt loaded with meaning. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt claustrophobic, the faint scent of her perfume in the air a reminder that something was wrong. I stayed awake that night, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was imagining it all. And deep down, I knew, whatever I was ignoring, whatever I refused to confront, it wasn't going away. It was late one Friday night, and I was alone in our apartment, exhausted from a 12-hour shift followed by a day of wedding errands. Emma had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went to grab a snack from the fridge. I don't know what made me glance at it. I told myself I was just checking the wedding group chat, but when I unlocked the screen, my world tilted. Messages between her and Mark flashed back at me, words I couldn't believe I was reading, flirty, intimate, casual in a way that felt like a knife twisting in my chest. "I wish you were here," one text read. "Can't stop thinking about last night," another. I froze, coffee cups slipping from my fingers and shattering on the tile, the sound so loud it made me jump. The smell of scorched coffee beans mixed with broken ceramic filled the small kitchen, but I didn't care. My mind reeled, replaying every interaction, every glance, every laugh over the past weeks, and suddenly it all made a horrifying kind of sense. The late nights, the jokes I didn't understand, the lingering touches, it wasn't stress or paranoia. It was them. And it was deliberate. I paced the apartment, the floorboards creaking beneath me, trying to process the betrayal without letting my anger explode. "How could she?" I whispered to the empty room. "How could you, Mark?" I ran my hands through my hair, heart hammering, each pulse echoing like a drum of doom. I wanted to throw things, scream, break something, anything, but I didn't. I just stared at the texts, rereading them again and again, hoping somehow they would disappear or that I was misreading everything. The living room felt smaller, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were pressing in, holding me captive in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the couch, phone still in hand, feeling the weight of disbelief, betrayal, and heartbreak pressing down like a physical force. My vision blurred, and I could taste the metallic tang of panic in my mouth. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a small lapse, a mistake, or a misunderstanding. This was the first real sign that the people I trusted most, the two people I thought had my back, were actively tearing my life apart. The next morning, I confronted Emma. I didn't yell, didn't storm the apartment, though every part of me wanted to. I just stood in the doorway, fists clenched, heart hammering like it would break through my chest. "Emma, what is this?" I asked, holding her phone up like evidence in a courtroom. Her face went pale for a split second, then she laughed nervously, a sound that made my stomach twist even more. It just happened, she said, voice shaking but oddly casual. I didn't mean for it to, but it did. It won't affect us. I swear. I blinked, trying to process the words. Just happened? Won't affect us? My world tilted. She was admitting to months of secret flirty texts, perhaps more, and trying to convince me it was nothing. Mark appeared behind her then, pretending innocence, his hands raised in mock surrender. Dude, calm down, he said, voice smooth, rehearsed, like a performance. You're overthinking. It's not what it looks like. His grin felt like a slap. My best friend, my brother in arms for over 10 years, was lying to me, colluding with the person I loved most. The apartment suddenly felt stifling, the air thick, heavy with betrayal. I could see Emma fidgeting, biting her lip, trying to gauge my reaction, as if my forgiveness was optional. I sank onto the couch, eyes wide, pulse spiking. I felt dizzy, like the floor had disappeared beneath me. The living room, the space that had been ours, was now a battlefield, and I was standing in the middle, completely unarmed. I remembered every late-night text, every lingering glance, every inside joke I hadn't understood. They had been planning this behind my back, weaving a web that I had walked blindly into. And suddenly, the life I thought I was building with Emma and celebrating with Mark wasn't real, it was a carefully staged lie. The revelation hit harder than anything before. My heart raced, chest tight, and I realized, whatever I had imagined as the worst betrayal was only the beginning. And I had no idea just how far this would go. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't confront them in front of friends or family. Instead, I made a decision in that quiet, suffocating apartment. I was going to leave, quietly, on my own terms. I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't plead, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I started mapping it out like a meticulous project, canceling vendors, calling caterers, emailing venues, changing passwords, moving my finances into accounts they didn't know existed. Every detail was deliberate, a silent reclamation of control in a situation that had stripped me of everything else. I spent late nights drafting messages that sounded neutral, polite, careful, while inside I felt fire and ice collide in my chest. I'm going to step back from the wedding plans for personal reasons, I typed, deleting drafts multiple times to make sure it wasn't dramatic, but also didn't leave a loophole. I could hear Emma's laughter somewhere in the apartment as she talked to Mark on the phone, oblivious to the fact that her future with me was already being dismantled. Each text I sent, each phone call I made to vendors, felt like a small, satisfying act of reclaiming the life they had tried to ruin. Packing my things felt strange. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and perfume, reminders of a life I'd shared and trusted, now tainted. I moved quietly, savoring the contrast between my outward calm and the storm of betrayal raging inside. Every item packed, every account closed, every message sent, reinforced a silent truth: they would never see the aftermath coming. The city outside was alive, sirens, car horns, the faint hum of the subway, but I was detached, present only in the meticulous choreography of my escape. No drama, no confrontation, no social media announcement. Just me, taking back my agency, vanishing from the lives of the two people who had betrayed me most. And as I closed the door behind me for the final time, the weight of heartbreak pressed down, but underneath it, a strange sense of satisfaction began to bloom. Little did they know, the world I was leaving wasn't just empty, it was mine again. After I left, the apartment felt impossibly empty. I sat on the steps outside, the city lights flickering across the sidewalk, and for the first time, I let myself really feel it. The betrayal wasn't just Emma. It wasn't just Mark. It was everything I had believed in for the past 2 years, the life I thought I was building, the trust one had invested, the sacrifices I had made. They had all been meaningless. My hands shook, heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst, and I couldn't stop the tears that spilled freely down my cheeks. The cool night air mixed with the bitter taste of my despair, sharp and metallic on my tongue. I replayed every moment in agonizing detail, the nights I stayed up planning, The weekends I worked extra shifts so she wouldn't have to lift a finger, the way I had trusted Mark implicitly, thinking he'd have my back no matter what. All of it had been twisted into something cruel. I whispered into the empty street, "Why me? Why did I deserve this?" The laughter of passers-by, oblivious to my pain, cut through me. Even the lights from the city felt cruel, like they were mocking my heartbreak, highlighting the emptiness of a life I thought I controlled. I wanted to call someone, anyone, to share the pain, but I couldn't. How could I explain that the people I loved most had stabbed me in the back? My phone sat silent in my pocket, a cruel reminder that no one could fix this for me. I thought about going back, confronting them, screaming, demanding justice, but every instinct told me that would only give them more power over me. So I stayed there, numb and broken, letting the night swallow me whole. I realized this was the lowest I had ever been, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And in that darkness, a strange clarity began to form. The only way out wasn't confrontation. The only way out was to disappear. But I still had no idea just how hard it would be to walk away completely. I left the city apartment behind without a single dramatic goodbye. No confrontations, no emotional breakdowns in front of Emma or Mark, no social media posts announcing my exit. I deleted my accounts, changed my numbers, and slowly erased every trace of my existence from the lives of the two people who had betrayed me most. Walking away quietly became an act of power. The streets I wandered felt both alien and liberating, the smell of rain on asphalt, the distant chatter of strangers, the neon glow of storefronts, all of it underscored a strange, exhilarating sense of freedom. For the first time in months, I could breathe without the weight of their deceit pressing down on my chest. I moved into a small, unfurnished apartment in a part of the city I barely knew. The space smelled faintly of fresh paint and carpet cleaner, a stark contrast to the lingering perfume and coffee of the apartment I had left behind. Nights were quiet except for the distant hum of the subway and occasional sirens, sounds that now felt comforting rather than oppressive. I spent evenings unpacking slowly, placing my few belongings deliberately, savoring the act of creating a space that was mine, untouched by anyone else's lies. Every small decision, from where to put a book, to how to arrange my kitchen, was a quiet reclamation of control. I reached out to a few old friends who hadn't known about the betrayal, people who could remind me of who I was before the storm. Reconnecting with them felt like opening windows after a long, suffocating winter. I could feel the tension slowly easing in my shoulders, the anxiety that had lived there for months melting away. And yet, the thought of Emma and Mark, living their lives, oblivious to the fact that I was gone, made my chest tighten, a subtle, satisfying ache. The silence became my shield. Every step I took away from them reinforced the truth that sometimes the strongest response isn't anger or revenge, it's absence. But even as I settled into my new life, I couldn't shake the awareness that they would eventually notice my disappearance, and when they did, the consequences of their betrayal would ripple in ways I could only imagine. The weeks after I disappeared blurred together at first, like my mind was slowly rebooting after a system crash. I threw myself into work, not because I loved it, but because routine gave me something solid to hold on to. Early mornings, the smell of burnt office coffee, the steady clatter of keyboards around me, it all grounded me. For the first time in years, every ounce of effort I put in was for myself, not for a future that had been built on lies. That realization alone felt both terrifying and freeing. In the quiet of my new apartment, I started rediscovering pieces of myself I had abandoned. I went to the gym late at night when it was nearly empty, headphones blasting, sweat burning away anger I didn't know how to express. I cooked meals just for me, simple things, standing barefoot on cold tile, realizing how rarely I'd done anything without considering someone else's preferences. There was an odd peace in that loneliness, even if it still hurt. Friends I hadn't seen in years slowly drifted back into my life. Over beers and late-night conversations, I laughed again, real laughter, not the polite kind I'd perfected during wedding planning. I didn't tell them everything, just enough to explain why I'd vanished. I needed to breathe, I'd say, and they understood more than I expected. Each conversation stitched me back together a little more, reminding me I was more than someone's fiancée or best friend. Still, the betrayal lingered like a shadow. Some nights, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Emma or Mark had noticed yet. If they were confused. If they felt even a fraction of the pain they'd caused me. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was moving forward, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Healing had started, yes, but the past had a way of resurfacing when you least expected it. And I had no idea that the silence I thought protected me was about to pull them straight back into my life. Months passed, and life began to feel lighter. I had routines again, spaces that were just mine, and nights when I could sleep without a knot of anxiety in my chest. But word eventually trickled back through mutual friends about Emma and Mark. Their relationship wasn't the effortless romance they had seemed to be hiding. Arguments, tension, and suspicion had started creeping in, like a slow leak in a dam they thought was unbreakable. They laughed less, texted less, and their once secretive smiles had turned stiff and calculated. I couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction hearing the updates. I hadn't planned this, I hadn't wanted revenge in the traditional sense, but seeing the consequences unfold felt like a confirmation that the world had its own way of balancing things. Friends whispered about the jealousy, the trust issues, the cracks in their social circle. Every message, every hint of tension, was a reminder that betrayal rarely comes without a price. I pictured them sitting across from each other in the living room they had shared, faces tight with frustration, words sharp and cutting. I imagined them replaying the past, realizing too late the lives they had disrupted. And I couldn't stop the small smile that crept across my face. Their world wasn't ruined, but it was noticeably less perfect. Meanwhile, I kept my life intentionally separate from theirs, thriving quietly. My apartment smelled of fresh coffee and clean sheets, my evenings were calm, and the people around me treated me with the respect and care I had been denied. I realized the ultimate power wasn't in confrontation, it was in disappearance, in reclaiming your peace while letting their own choices catch up to them. Even from a distance, I could see the shift in balance. The betrayal no longer held power over me, and the subtle consequences they faced were proof that sometimes, the strongest justice comes silently, without spectacle. It's been over a year since I vanished from Emma and Mark's lives, and I can honestly say I've never felt more free. My mornings begin with sunlight spilling through the blinds, the smell of brewing coffee filling the apartment, and no one else's expectations pressing on my chest. I work on projects I'm passionate about, spend weekends exploring the city alone or with friends who value me, and for the first time, I make decisions solely for myself. I no longer feel the weight of their betrayal because I've built a life that doesn't need their validation, or even their awareness. Sometimes, memories sneak in uninvited. I'll think of the apartment we shared, the wedding plans that never came to fruition, the nights I stayed up working overtime to make her happy, all while they plotted behind my back. But those moments sting less now. I've learned that my peace isn't dependent on their regret, their guilt, or their recognition of what they did. It's mine, and I protect it fiercely. I've reconnected with people who actually see me, the friends who've always had my back, mentors who inspire me, colleagues who respect my work ethic. I feel a sense of confidence I didn't think was possible after being blindsided by betrayal. The world feels vast, full of possibility, and I am finally living in a version of life I can control. And as I sit on my balcony at sunset, the city bathed in gold, I realize the ultimate truth. I walked away without chaos, without drama, and without giving them another chance to hurt me. I disappeared from their lives, unbroken, and stronger than ever. No confrontation, no spectacle, just quiet, absolute reclamation of my life. The betrayal that once defined my nights now only reminds me of my resilience. And in that stillness, I finally feel whole.